GOA is defunding the ATF. Again, you heard that right. We're on the warpath with our allies in Congress. Our language to cut 20% of ATF's manpower and more just made it into this year's appropriations bill. But there's a bigger story here. The Overton window is changing. Congress is becoming more comfortable with cutting the ATF's budget and rolling back gun control. But our work has just begun. As activists, we need to continue to curate a political environment that rewards pro-gun moves and pushes anti-gun ones. All that and more coming up. Hey guys, I'm Tiffany and you're watching One in the Chamber, the show that helps you become a better gun rights activist. GOA backs language to cut 20% of personnel and cut $418 million from the ATF's budget passed out of committee. The language passed even though it was under attack by Democrats, who call it anti-law enforcement and more.
This bill proposes a budget for ATF of $1.2 billion. It is a $418 million cut, a 48% cut to ATF. ATF, who has fewer than, I think, about 5,000 employees, 2,500 are special agents. This would require the cutting of at least 1,000 positions, and ATF, we all know, is already overworked and under-resourced. So I'm absolutely puzzled by that.
It proposes deep and damaging cuts to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, an agency central to enforcing federal gun laws and preventing illegal firearms trafficking.
This bill also decimates funding for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which would lose more than 1,000 personnel who work with our state and local law enforcement to keep illegal guns off our streets, catch dangerous criminals, and prevent gun crimes.
But thankfully, pro-gun congressmen like Andrew Clyde were there to set the record straight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've heard from the other side of the aisle a number of great reasons to vote for this bill. Apparently, my Democrat colleagues believe that the federal government has sole authority over every aspect of Americans' lives. They seem to forget, or intentionally forget, that the federal government is constrained by the 18 enumerated powers outlined in Article 1 of the Constitution, and that the 10th Amendment further constrains the federal government by saying, and I quote, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." And to quote Wikipedia, that I don't do very often here, but the 10th Amendment was ratified on December 15th, 1791. It expresses the principle of federalism, whereby the federal government and the individual states share power by mutual agreement. The 10th Amendment prescribes that the federal government has only those powers delegated to it by the Constitution, and that all other powers not forbidden to the states by the Constitution are reserved to each state or to the people. So I think this bill does a lot to move our federal government back in line with the restrictions of the Constitution, and I support it moving forward to full committee, and I yield back.
After all that, the language was passed.
On this vote, the ayes are 9, the noes are 6. The bill is favorably reported to the full committee.
So this could be the second time in the same number of years that we are able to defund ATF. The first time GOA-backed language was passed through a similar process, defunding the ATF by over $122 million. But if this passes into law, we'll earn the title of largest cut to ATF's budget for the second time. But not only that, this legislation prevents the ATF-DEA merger and ensures that any of the money given to ATF cannot be used to enforce any regulation issued by ATF after January 21st, 2021. That is huge. Not only have we cut ATF's budget by nearly 20%, directly affecting their staff, we've now stopped one of the worst situations imaginable combining ATF and DEA. And to top it off, we've also defunded all of the Biden administration's tyrannical, illegal rulemaking. But it's important to recognize things weren't always this way. The ATF has been around since 1972 and has been harassing gun owners since day one, and GOA has been right there fighting back. We produced a documentary in the 1980s titled Breaking the Law in the Name of the Law to tell the untold stories about ATF's harassment campaign against gun owners. And to this day, we continue to raise awareness, file lawsuits, and lobby Congress to fight gun control everywhere. Part of this campaign is to introduce legislation and get language into must-pass bills, even if it gets taken out. And each year that our language passes is a victory. But getting the language into bills is a win too. You might be asking, how is just getting language into a bill a win if it eventually gets removed? Well, consider the fact that we've tried for years to defund and abolish the ATF. Yet, only recently was it possible to do so, ironically, during Joe Biden's presidency. And now that President Trump is in office, his administration is trying to take an even bigger chunk out of ATF. These are all steps on the path to securing the total abolition of the ATF. We're building up to something huge here. And today, these steps are only possible because we have for years prepped pro-gun congressmen on GOA members' priorities. Without working with our grassroots membership to put the pressure on congressmen to add pro-gun language to bills, nothing would have changed, and we wouldn't be trending in a positive direction. Imagine a world where we're able to cut ATF's funding and fire hundreds or thousands of employees each year. Then, when Republicans eventually achieve a filibuster-proof trifecta, they'll pass their full agenda. After years of cuts, we'll be in a great place to lobby Congress to abolish the ATF once and for all. But I know some of you are getting ready to comment down below, I don't want to cut, just abolish the ATF or nothing. Let's imagine this all or nothing scenario. Since Congress won't abolish the ATF this year, GOA does nothing. Because we're not putting pressure on Republicans to cut ATF's budget, they instead choose to increase ATF funding. So, ATF increases year after year. And now let's imagine that eventually Republicans win a filibuster-proof trifecta. In this scenario, do you really think that Republicans will magically become pro-gun when they have that much power? That they will go against years of increasing ATF funding? That they will just abolish this tyrannical agency? Absolutely not. We must set the stage, train Congress into doing the right thing on a regular basis, and even give them credit when they do the right things here and there. It reminds me of that old Milton Friedman quote.
No, we don't need to change Congress, excuse me. You know, people have a great misunderstanding about this. People in Congress are in a business. They're trying to buy votes. They're in the business of competing with one another to get elected. The same congressman will vote for a different thing if he thinks that's politically profitable. You don't have to change Congress. People have a great misconception in this way. They think the way you solve things is by electing the right people. It's nice to elect the right people, but that isn't the way you solve things. The way you solve things is by making it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right things.
We need to make it politically popular for Congress to be pro-gun. We must keep working to normalize the right to own military-grade weapons, to defend against tyranny if you want Congress to fully repeal machine guns from the NFA. Congress isn't there yet, but nowadays, there are way more members these days than there used to be. Take GOA allies that we helped get elected, like A+ rated Thomas Massey, Andrew Clyde, and Eric Burleson, just to name a few. And we all can see how it had to become normal for people to own suppressors and pistol braces for Congress to even think about removing suppressors or short-barrel firearms from the NFA. Milton's principle even applies to the situation with a parliamentarian. It needed to be politically popular for Thune to fire her or for J.D. Vance to overrule her. Gun owners were loud and clear. In fact, they were the loudest on the Hill, but not enough other interest groups spoke up, and many other DC interest groups refused to speak. Without a coalition of conservatives to back up Republicans, they were too afraid of the bad PR, too afraid of losing public confidence to fire the parliamentarian and deliver a real win. To win that fight, gun owners needed to be a part of the conservative coalition. Like fiscal hawks upset with spending on Medicaid and student loans for illegals, pro-lifers upset that they can only defund Planned Parenthood for a year, and many other groups to all call for firing the parliamentarian. But our efforts fell short, and not for lack of trying by gun owners. See, that's the thing about Washington, D.C. politicians rarely want to take chances. They don't like change and don't want to rock the boat. And that's why it's very important to continuously get these people on record supporting pro-gun legislation. That way, when eventually there's enough votes to pass the filibuster, the political appetite for passing pro-gun legislation is so strong, it isn't a question if it's going to happen or not. Politicians aren't going to magically get excited about pro-gun legislation unless pro-gun activists like those of you watching get loud every year and make sure that your elected officials hear you. For example, anti-gun politicians make sure that they introduce a so-called assault weapons ban legislation every single year of Congress. That current legislation has 127 co-sponsors. These are anti-gun members of Congress going on record saying that they'll vote for an assault weapons ban. And while they certainly don't have the votes currently to pass something like that in the House, let alone beat the filibuster in the Senate, it doesn't mean they aren't working year after year, getting members on record, pledging to support this unconstitutional garbage, prepping for if or when they return to power in the legislature. This is why it's important as a gun rights activist to stay engaged. Even if we don't win every fight, we know that it's the fight that is important because eventually it will turn to victory. For example, just take the willingness this year to significantly roll back gun control in both the legislative branch and the executive. Republicans are willing to put a full repeal of SBRs, SBSs, AOWs, and suppressors into the one big beautiful bill. They let an unelected bureaucrat take it out, which is outrageous, and they need to know that. But on the other hand, we made it farther than any other gun owners in 91 years to fully remove not one, but 4 things from the NFA. And in the end, we repealed the tax that kept these NFA items from average citizens for decades. So that's why GOA is pushing on appropriations now. This bill is full of amazing pro-2A wins. No, not all of them are going to pass. That just isn't a political reality with such narrow Republican control of both chambers. But if we can keep setting the standards high and forcing pro-gun based techs, perhaps we can gain a few victories each year. And if we keep at it, when we finally win the right election, we'll also be starting from the strongest possible position to get the full wish list. So be proud that you bullied Congress into cutting ATF's budget last year, and now Republicans want to do it again. Gun owners did that. It is good to know that the Overton window is moving in our favor, but realize that didn't happen by accident. It happened because all of you out there care enough to put pressure on your elected officials in the name of gun rights. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.